Okay, Better Call Saul Season 4, Episode 2, titled Breathe. These are my thoughts. Uh, one thing that well, first of all, I guess I should say, in general, my thoughts on this episode are that it was, or at least my initial thoughts when I had just gotten done watching the episode, I thought that the first third or so, or the first half maybe, was a little bit slow, and then the next half, or the last two-thirds, were really, really quite phenomenal. So that was my... And I'm starting to kind of reconsider a little bit, but in general, I maintain that it was kind of slow and meandering in the first, again, third, I guess, and then it immediately really picked up after that, and from then on. One thing that I really appreciate about the show, given its format, and something that I think in this episode it was able to accomplish maybe better than it ever has, is giving each character, and it has, there are many that are somehow like kind of equally important or focused on or significant. The show gives each of these characters, across two different parts of the universe, mind you, the cartel side and the lawyer side, it gives them each and all a permissible amount of time. It gives them all at least a scene, an important scene, or something to really focus in on them. No one gets left behind, and in this episode that is abundantly clear in that each character has a really big role to play in the episode. You got Gus, who kind of bookends it, opening scene, ending scene, he has a scene or two in the middle. Jimmy has a big, significant scene in the copy place, and of course you see him again after that. Kim has her big standout scene when she's yelling at Howard. That's maybe the highlight of the entire episode, other than maybe the ending with Gus and Nacho and shit. Nacho, speaking of, kind of like Hector, he has a few scenes interspersed throughout, making it kind of the if there's any one through line in the episode, it's the Gus Nacho thing and dynamic, and that kind of, that manifests, that becomes clear that kind of was the, like I said, the through line with that ending scene where they finally come together, and it's a big explosive moment. And furthermore, you see there is a scene with Mike. Mike wasn't as much a focus in this episode. He was not as important. But even so, his storyline progresses, and you see his and Lydia's conversation, and you even see Hector. Hector is, despite being in a coma, there's a scene that kind of, I mean, in the beginning, you see him in the ER and everything, but that still is kind of Gus's scene. Once Gus arrives, you see that he's kind of still he is the point of that scene, and then, there's another scene, and I'll discuss that more later, because I really enjoyed this particular scene, but when the cousins and Nacho and Arturo were in the hospital, and Hector is kind of like, I don't know, it's this oddly, almost spiritual moment, but then it's also played for comedic effect. Such a lot to that scene. I'd like to discuss that further. I haven't, as always, or like last time, I have not planned what I'm going to say. I may end up rambling, yammering. I might say and a lot. I don't know. We'll see what comes to mind. So, where to begin? I guess the scene that really is hardest to make heads or tails of is the Jimmy scene, when he is really pitching himself to the copy shop people, so they'll hire him. And, of course, there are a lot of 180 twists and turns in that scene. You think, it's Jimmy's... I thought Jimmy sold himself pretty well to begin with before he leaves and then immediately comes back. And when he did that, I was like, you're pressing your luck. They're not going to hire you now. They told you to get the hell out. They might hire you. They're not going to do it now. And then they do, and then Jimmy fucking... He turns his back on it. Obviously, I don't mean to just reiterate everything that happened. But what's important to... I mean, first of all, that scene right there is very much supposed to be kind of difficult to decipher. Jimmy, kind of like in the last episode, is very much an enigma here. You're supposed to... You have absolutely no clue what's going on in his mind. You just see his actions. And that's interesting. I don't know if this show, or even Breaking Bad, I can't think of any point where they really did it like this, or they really played it like this. at least not to this extent. And so, to me, the question becomes, was Jimmy in this scene really, was Jimmy making all of the decisions that led to these twists in the scene, of which there are like 2 or 3? Was Jimmy making these decisions in the moment, like split-second decisions, or did he kind of have the whole thing planned as the performance that it ultimately became? See, if it's the former, if he did make these decisions right in the moment, then, and you see him, like, for instance, when he comes out of the office room the first time, and he kind of gets the camera brings him into close-up, and you see him contemplate, and then he decides to turn back in and drive the point home, really sell himself, and say, either you hire me right now or don't at all. That suggests to me that he did make that decision right there in that moment. And the thing is, if that's what he's doing, then that really suggests to me that he is spiraling and unsure of what to do. He's a lot less calm and collected inside than he's letting on, and there's like kind of a storm brewing directly beneath the surface, because he's going off, and he's kind of, again, like, there's no better word for it than spiraling. He doesn't know what the fuck to do right now, if he didn't have this all planned out before he went in there. Obviously, what happens, okay, first of all, let me say, if this was all planned like a performance, and he knew he was gonna, he knew that excuse me, that these people would hire him if he tried hard enough, and he wanted to just fucking turn his back on them, then I don't know what to make of it, truly. I don't know what the hell kind of harebrained scheme, long-term scheme he has going on here. Maybe he really just wanted to go in there. If that's the case, maybe he just wanted to go in there to get some kind of information on what he could pilfer, like he ends up deciding to do. Because, that's what happens. He sees the Alpine Shepherd boy and the other ceramic pieces from his old client, and I'll speak more on that in a second. And he decides to go and recruit Mike to see if they can make a buck off this shit. And, I can't wait to see what happens with that. That seems like just the kind of petty crime that Jimmy in this moment would do. And I would like to see Mike involved in that too. That'll be fun. I bet that'll be a good time. So anyway, what am I trying to say here? Right, that moment, a lot of moments, we all know this. This show is rife with symbolism. I thought that was just a great moment on its own. I thought that was a great moment on its own. That little nod to the Alpine Shepherd boy. Kind of a coincidence that Jimmy would stumble upon it right in that little area, 6 months after or however long, after he had seen all of them in his client's apartment, or home, or whatever. But the show really does that kind of thing well, and Breaking Bad did too, where it's just, little coincidental things like this can happen, and it's never really consequential, but then the characters make it a consequential part of the storyline, like Jimmy here is going to decide to do by stealing these things. On its own, and I didn't know that's where they were going to go. I thought it was just going to be a little detail that has that is poignant and striking symbolically at first when Jimmy first noticed that the ceramic pieces were there. And of course the guy, the copy place guy, he's like, yeah, our somebody's aunt or grandmother, Alma, recently passed away and left them there. And of course we know Alma was one of Jimmy's clients. The symbolic meaning being that one of Jimmy's old clients had died, suggesting that his old practice and what he used to dedicate himself to, the noble pursuit of elder law, that is dead and gone. And now this figurine is, in this office building of these strangers, just like, kind of, what was once I really don't know where I'm going with this right now, so bear with me. But, like, what was once a sentimental piece that was, something very important to this nice old woman is now just kind of sitting there as a forgotten set piece in this friggin' office building that, and that piece does not have the sentimental value anymore. It just seems, it really is indicative of some kind of spiritual death, just like Alma, the owner, has died. And that really represents to me, at the same time, how something in Jimmy has died. Otherwise, if obviously that piece has a connection to him because it was his former client. I'm really saying this in a very roundabout way, sorry. Anyway, I didn't think they were going to make the Alpine Shepherd boy and that shit part of the plot, and it seems that they are going to, which is great. But even if they hadn't, that moment would have been fantastic on its own, in my opinion. Anyway, yeah, when I first saw this scene, I thought it was a bit too long for its own good. I didn't realize that it was, Jimmy was going to decide to steal these things, these figurines, making the scene worth it. At first, I thought it was just a big, 10-minute long nothing, where we, they spent 10 minutes on a scene just to tell us that Jimmy wasn't going to take the job, And I was like, oh wow, big, 10 minutes, holy shit, that's a lot of time to spend on a character, like a scene that ultimately just amounts to, oh, this is supposed to represent, or this is supposed to indicate where his mind is right now, but it's not going to progress the plot at all. I still think, even that it did connect to what Jimmy's next move is going to be ultimately, I still think they spent a little too long on it. I think it was an odd, I don't know, it was kind of, they still spent some time on the inconsequential details of it that they didn't need to, but that's really not too important. Same thing, I also thought it was somewhat slow, the Mike scene. They kind of just go in there, and it seemed like a necessary, if they were going to, in order to keep the characters in character, specifically I'm talking about Lydia, it's like they had to have this scene because Lydia wouldn't just let Mike go about his business like he had been doing. But ultimately it didn't matter because Lydia calls Gus and Gus says that what Mike has been doing is fine and he can continue. So, ultimately it didn't really amount to anything. But oh well, it's okay. They rarely have scenes like that in this show. Moving on to where I believe the episode really picked up is, and again, looking back on it, that long Jimmy scene actually is pretty damn good. But at the time, I was a bit underwhelmed by it. Anyway, starting in the hospital when we see the cousins and then Nacho and Arturo show up. Is his name Arturo? I think that's what his name is. The guy who ultimately dies. I keep saying the word ultimately. The guy who dies when, at the end with Gus and everything. When they show up in the hospital, it's kind of, I said it was a bit of a spiritual moment. It just, I don't know, maybe that was in my head, maybe that's what I wanted it to be because of the extreme irony that would have, as extremely ironic as that would have been for, these people to essentially, to speak positively and comfortingly to Hector. I was like, wow, are we really gonna see that? And of course we didn't. And that's what the comic relief was. You see, it's like, somebody speak. So the doctor says, speak to Hector. And I laughed out loud at that moment when I first saw it. It's so fucking hilarious, because the cousins are, it's like, what, are the cousins gonna speak? They never speak. And then, is Nacho gonna speak? Nacho is the one who put Hector in this situation. So, of course, Arturo is the one to speak, but he doesn't know what the hell to say. And so eventually Nacho does speak. And that is another ironic moment that works so well. When the scene ends and you see Nacho, having to comfort and reassure Hector. It just, and that is a theme in this episode, that Nacho is being pressed from all sides. And again, I will speak more on this later once we get to the end scene. But let me just say that Nacho, so far, has arguably been the most compelling character to me for this season. Particularly due to this episode. What came next? There was the scene with Kim and Howard next, I think. Now, this was, like I said, a standout moment particularly because of Ray Seahorn's performance. We've never, ever, ever seen Kim like that, even close to that angry. I mean, we saw her angry when she, punched Jimmy in the arm in the car in Season 2, Episode 9, after, she realized, she knew that Jimmy had indeed, that Chuck was right. Jimmy had transposed the numbers on the documents. But even then, she didn't yell. She didn't scream like she did here. And holy shit, I didn't know. This is another instance that the show threw me for a loop. Because I thought maybe this would have been too obvious, and therefore it's a good thing I'm not a writer for this show. Because you see at the end of season of 401, you see when Jimmy makes Howard feel really bad at the end, and you see that the most important part of that scene, potentially, is Kim's reaction. You see her really surprised, and she doesn't usually, she's even keel and doesn't emote too much, but she does a double take after Jimmy says, "That's your cross to bear." She couldn't believe her ears that he had said that. She couldn't imagine that out of Jimmy. And that scene and the episode ends with Kim, kind of contemplating, considering what Jimmy had just done, implying that the most important part here, what that moment out of Jimmy served to accomplish, was kind of drive Kim away, start to drive a wedge between him and Kimmy and Jim. So anyway, my assumption was that Kimmy and Jim would kind of be a little bit, not cold-shouldered, that would have been too much, but that there would have been something lost between them starting now. And that, in a sense, didn't happen at all. Because what Kim does in this scene with Howard in this episode is she defends Jimmy more vehemently than she ever has before. She chose to be as loyal as possible to Jimmy. Then again, in a sense, it's almost as if she's kind of forcing herself to. It's like she's forcing herself to be as loving to Jimmy as she can. And there is something lost between them because they're starting to keep secrets from one another. Kim obviously hides the letter from Chuck from Jimmy, the letter to Jimmy from Chuck from Jimmy. What the fuck did I just say? She hides that letter, doesn't want Jimmy to see it, she doesn't want to remind Jimmy of Chuck, because she doesn't like seeing Jimmy when he's thinking about Chuck. Because now she realizes that there is a part of Jimmy, the part of Jimmy that focuses, the part of Jimmy that despises Chuck, is a part that she doesn't like. And so she doesn't like to incite that part of Jimmy rising to the surface. It makes sense. So they are, and Jimmy is kind of withholding information about what he did. Not that it's anything really consequential, but, obviously he kind of spent his... And furthermore, no, I shouldn't even say that he withholds the information about what he did in the copy shop, that copy place, from Kim. That's not important. What he's hiding from Kim is the fact that he's about to go steal that shit from that place. So, there you go. They're starting to keep secrets from each other, so there is something lost between them. It's just that on the surface, they would seem to be closer to each other than ever. And of course, the nature of secret keeping necessitates that neither of them knows that the other is keeping secrets from themselves, if you follow me. So, there you go. What's left now? Right, the end scene. You got... And this is where... It's like I said last time, I watched these episodes, or at least these first 3 episodes of this season before I go back to college, back to school. I'm watching them with my family, and I noticed this at the same moment that my brother did. In that last scene, before Gus shows up, when it's just Nacho and Arturo taking I think those are like packages of money. I don't think it's meth. I think it's the money. And they try to, again, like in the last season, they try to take 6 for Hector. And, they are allowed to, seemingly, but then Gus fucking shows up. Anyway, when Arturo says, back me up when I tell him that we're taking 6, and Nacho is like, okay, that moment that Nacho agrees to that it's so clear to me, and, you know, my brother pointed it out too, and I was like, that's exactly right. He almost seems kind of fatalistic at this point, in that he, like, with no display of emotion, he was like, he clearly doesn't want to be in this situation anymore. He's dangerous. He's dangerous. Okay, that's true. He's in a dangerous situation. He says to his dad earlier in the episode he's out. He clearly wants to be out. And yet he's just, there's nothing he can do but put himself in a deadly situation just because if he doesn't, then he might be putting himself in another deadly situation by not getting Hector, the Salamanca family at this point, I should say, because Hector's out of commission. If he's not, you know, getting the amount of money that he needs to get, he could fucking just be killed anyway. And so he's just the emotionlessness of that moment that he takes his gun out in that room, you know, the trade room, whatever the hell you call it. That moment of emotionlessness, it speaks so clearly that he is like, just, like, he is miserable, but he can't show it. And he's not even so much miserable, that's not the right word, he is just almost, I don't know, almost admitted defeat. And not permanently, not like he's admitted defeat on the whole, because he's still trying to get out. Obviously, he has an agenda to leave the business at this point, but he's so conceited to just, like, he has to do this kind of shit. He has to put himself in harm's way every, like, day in and day out. And that's just, like, man, that is poignant, in my opinion. And again, kind of like with Bob Odenkirk's performance, it's saying so much with so little expression and emotion. And then the stake is driven further through his heart when Gus shows up and kills Arturo, and of course now Nacho is under Gus's control. I didn't know how this was going to play out. Gus and Nacho obviously have... If Gus is trying to, you know, Gus wants to make Hector suffer on his own terms. And Nacho also was trying to kill Gus. I mean, not Gus, Hector, sorry. So clearly they have something of mutual interests, but at the same time, Gus is so arrogant and controlling himself that he refuses to let anyone influence what happens to Hector. I didn't know exactly how this was going to play out, how the Nacho-Gus relationship was going to pan out this season. I didn't know if Gus would be kind of sympathetic, and they would kind of partner up. Clearly that's not the case. They are just fucking... They are making Nacho hurt as much as possible, because now he has another person that he has to answer to or else be killed, when he also is obligated to continue answering to the cartel. So, holy fuck, Nacho, like... I didn't think Nacho's storyline was going to go like this season. I thought he was going to kind of rise to power within the cartel now that Hector was gone. And of course that would mean taking on more responsibility and again putting himself in harm's way more than he ever has. But I thought it would be kind of on his own terms. I didn't think that he would so clearly, so obviously want out of the business. Now, I thought he just wanted Hector gone, and after that he would be fine to continue. I didn't realize he would want out and wouldn't be able to get out, and he would have all these fucking people coming down on him from all sides, all angles. That's, like, holy shit, that's a lot better than what I thought was going to happen. I thought he would just be, I don't know what I thought. I've gone on long enough. This episode ultimately is even better than the last one, though it did start out kind of slow, but it just is, it's made up for by the fucking... just the machine gun pace of new plot points and shit established in the second half to 2/3. And that's all I got to say.